Losing bidder Richard Young today threatened to withdraw from the commission probing the multi-billion rand arms deal. Young expressed frustrations that the commissioners weren't even allowing him to formulate an opinion on the findings of a German probe. This after yesterday's ruling that he can't present the findings of the 2006 investigation as his own evidence. Government and Department of Defense lawyers have submitted that the German report was repudiated and that it was of no value to the SABC Commission. The report contains allegations of fraud and corruption in the 1999 arms deal. The investigations closed in 2008 and were later discredited. Yesterday, Young withdrew the report as part of his evidence and this morning lost his composure. To take us through today's proceedings, we are now joined by SABC reporter Njanji Chauke. Good evening, Njanji, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Lulu.
Now, Njanji, tell us what really sparked this threat by Richard Young to withdraw from the proceedings.
Yes, as you recall that yesterday this German report was taken from him as the basis of his evidence. As you know, the concern that has been raised by the chairperson, actually by the two commissioners, that this report that is using as the basis of his evidence was discredited and was actually repudiated a number of years ago. This investigation that was done by the Germans relates to the allegations of fraud and corruption. But the report was later compiled and it was even forwarded to the presidency, questioning the credibility of this report. In his own words, Richard Young said that if he can't even form a view or an opinion based on that report, then he may as well go home. It was a very heated moment, and we saw the judge taking exception to such threats, saying that they're not going to tolerate such threats from Richard Young. So it was very heated and tense indeed earlier this morning, but tensions simmered down and then the proceedings went ahead.
Now, Njanji, what is Richard Young really expecting to happen through this commission, and why the fight to keep this report in as part of his evidence?
What we know is that the allegations of fraud and corruption that have been made over those 15 to 16 years, he was basing those allegations on this German investigation that was done in Hamburg and Munich, where those companies that supplied South Africa with those 4 corvettes, or what we can refer to as the warships, conducted those investigations. So he really, his evidence relied heavily on this report that was compiled by the Germans. In that report, they finger a number of high-profile people in South Africa. People like Tony Yengeni are being mentioned, and other high-profile politicians, as well as political organizations in South Africa. They also detail how money was transferred to tax havens overseas and was later on channeled here to South Africa. As you know, that this commission is also investigating those allegations of fraud and corruption, and they are likely to submit a report to the presidency at least by October.
Now, Njanji, how would such a withdrawal have impacted on the commission's quest to probe the allegations of fraud and corruption?
It would have had a very great impact to the Commission, considering that last year in September, we saw other arms deal critics, or the so-called whistleblowers, also jumping ship or withdrawing from the proceedings. Here I'm referring to people like Paul Holden, Andrew Feinstein, and Henny van Vieren. Last year, they withdrew from the proceedings, questioning the credibility of the Commission, saying that it was biased towards government, and we saw them pulling out of the proceedings. They had a very serious problem with regards to the way the commissioners were handling the proceedings, also in terms of accessing accessing some of the key documents. Because what we have seen with this commission is that if you have evidence of fraud and corruption, or if you have personal knowledge, you must come to the commission and submit those allegations. But you can't rely on newspaper articles, you can't rely on information that has been lifted off the internet, or even reports that have been compiled elsewhere beyond South African borders.
And Janji, now, when is the commission likely to wrap up its findings?
You'll remember that this commission has been running for almost 3 to 4 years and now, Richard Young being the last key witness. There are 2 other people that will come through and wrap things up. But from what we have heard in the past few days, there are indications that the commissioners are likely to apply for another extension. They were supposed to wrap up the proceedings in April and then sit down, compile a report from all those thousands of documents that have been submitted as evidence to the commission, and present that report to the presidency around October. But we've had Richard Young going ahead mentioning some of the names of the people that have already testified. And we saw government and Department of Defense lawyers jumping, saying, how can you mention these people when these people appeared here at this commission? You were not even here to cross-examine them. So we are likely to see people that have already testified being recalled to come and have their evidence tested by Richard Young. So it looks like there's a long way ahead of us indeed.
Janji, thank you so much for joining us. That was SABC reporter Janji Chauke joining us live from our Pretoria studios. Time now